Hello YouTube. Today, port finish single malt whiskeys. Let's dive in. Hello YouTube, and welcome back to Happy Hour. So as the intro stated, today I thought I would compare two port finished single malt whiskeys. The key difference really being price and age, I guess, but they kind of come hand in hand usually, right? So we've got my two entries today for this head-to-head are Glen Moray. I believe it's pronounced like Glen Moray, like Glen Moray. When you have it with it, when I've heard a Scottish guy, pronounce it, and it was more like a Glen Moray than Glen Moray. So I'm gonna go with like Glen Moray. All right, Glen Moray. And then another Glenmorangie. This is the Glenmorangie Quinta Ruban. So the reason why I kind of want to do these was they're both port finished single malt whiskeys, and but I should say they're both quite different pricing and with that kind of age statement. So the Glen Moray is a pretty basic entry level. Again, I hate using those words, but I just did. And very inexpensive single malt whiskey brand. I'm not super familiar with them. In fact, this is the first bottle that I've purchased, but I have started to see more and more of them in my local liquor store, and they are incredibly inexpensive. I say incredibly inexpensive, like they're in the price range of a lot of the blended, like I would say bottom shelf blended whiskeys. For example, this guy is $21.99 for a single malt Scotch port cask finished. They have a sherry finished one. They also have a standard. They have a peated one. They even have a 12-year-old and an 18-year-old, I think, as well. I think the standard Glen Moray is like even $1 or $2 cheaper, like $19.99 or $20.99. So incredibly affordable. Single malt Scotch, that's pretty wild. Like I said, like Ballantine's and Cutty Sark and Grant's and stuff are all in that $20 mark as well. So that's kind of cool. I give them super props for being able to produce a single malt at that price range. And then on the other hand, we have, it's certainly not astronomical in price. Very well-known brand, Glenmorangie, and maybe one of my favorites, if not my favorite Glenmorangie that I remember. I really like the Standard 10 as well. I remember there was a Sauternes one that I liked as well. It was a bit more expensive again, but I've had a few bottles of this. I've had a few bottles of all of them over the years, and I do remember I liked the Quinta Ruban maybe the most. It was pretty interesting. The kicker here is it's a 14-year-old. So that right there is pretty great. It's a 14-year-old single malt, also finished in port casks. And this one is actually, I think, fairly reasonably priced as well for what you're getting. Around me, it's $61.99. So that's not cheap, but $62 for a 14-year-old single malt from, again, a reputable brand is not a bad deal. Like that's kind of the going rate for a lot of 12-year-old scotches. So again, I think a pretty fair deal. So we've got kind of the inexpensive range, and then we'll call it kind of middle of the shelf range, both finished in port casks, and fight. No, I'm just kidding. So I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to open them up and pour them, and we'll get into it. All right, we're back. So we got the Glen Moray on the left, or my left, your right, and the Quinta Ruban on my right, your left. So color, the Quinta Ruban is definitely a little darker. It's a little more color in the Glenmorangie. And I remember this actually when I think I actually did a little review, maybe with my wife. It was one of my first videos that we did where I had a little Glenmorangie sampler pack. And I think I picked the Quinta Ruban as the one I enjoyed the most. I think we did them blind. But I say blind because unless you're using opaque glasses, the Quinta Ruban definitely has almost like a kind of a purpley pinkish hue to it. You can't probably pick it up on camera, but yeah, in comparison, it's a little bit darker, but it also has a little bit of that pinkish, purpley hue. The Glen Moray kind of looks like, doesn't really have that unique hue that I see from the port. It looks kind of like a standard single malt. So I'm going to go Glen Moray first. Let's give it a nose. Smells pretty nice. Okay, well, actually, let's start. So the Glen Moray is 40% alcohol. I'm not going to even read it, but I'd be extremely, extremely surprised if it's not chill filtered or any color added. So we'll just assume that it is. And again, for its price, I am not complaining about that whatsoever. The Glenmorangie is 46%, so a little more ABV. That's not bad, actually, right? Like I said, $62 for a 14-year-old finished whiskey at 46%. I give them their props too. So these are both pretty good buys. Well, let's find out, I guess. If the whiskey sucks, then they're not, but they don't. I've already tried them. All right, so the Glen Moray, I get a little bit of the port smell. I don't know if you guys aren't really familiar with port, then, well, it's basically fortified wine, right? Wine, they add a ton of brandy to it to stop the fermentation process, but it's fortified. It's sweet, syrupy wine, for lack of better words, to oversimplify it. And when I usually, on the port finished whiskeys, I usually get that kind of port whiff right at the top of the note of the nose, and then it kind of moves into the single malt whiskey, the standard single malt whiskey kind of flavors and noses and scents. And this is very subtle. I have no idea how long they leave these in port barrels for. Probably not that long. I don't think it's in any barrel for that long, certainly not 14 years. It's a pleasant nose. A touch of the port. Yeah, a little bit of the sweetness of the port. And then it smells like a sweet kind of single malt whiskey. It's kind of hard to explain. Getting a little ethanol. It smells good. There's definitely something intriguing there, but it's not, I can't quite smell the port. Let me try the Quinta Ruban. Yeah, so, okay, wow, that's good. So I get more of the actual port smell here, but I also get more of an aged single malt whiskey below that. These probably all sound like pretty obvious adjectives considering exactly what we're talking about. They fit the profile, right? They fit what they're actually selling. I get a little more port, and then I get a little more kind of darker, usually in darker or older whiskeys, I get more of a richness, like a little bit more rich caramel, woody, I don't want to say funk, but it smells, this is the stupidest analogy, it just smells older. I can't quite put my finger on what older means. The edges are a little bit more rounded. There's nothing spiky. It just feels a little more maybe concentrated. But yeah, the port does come through a little bit more on this guy. It smells really nice. So this is why I like doing the side by side. So it's probably maybe this is still in my nostrils a bit, but when I go back to the Glen Moray, a little bit more port comes through. Interesting. Definitely smells younger. Because it is, but it smells younger. When I say younger, it's a little brighter, a little fruitier, a little more alcohol-y in nature, but smells nice. They both smell really nice. The edge goes to the Quinta Ruban, but I'll tell you, not by a country mile. All right, let's taste the Glen Moray. Wow, it tastes really nice, actually. So you can see I've had a little bit of this. This bottle I've had for quite a while. I haven't tasted either of these in months. That's even better than I remember it, to be quite frank. This is my first whiskey of the day. My palate's fresh. I can taste a little bit of that port finish. It's not overwhelming. It's surprisingly subtle, but almost, dare I say, elegant, because it's not like punching you in the face. It really works with the rest of the whiskey. Or the other flavors in the whiskey. It's sweet. It's young. I actually don't mind young whiskeys for what they're for, or for what they represent. I usually get a lot of bright sweetness out of them. I can get a little bit of malt. Sometimes I do get a bit of an ethanol kick, but it's not that bad with this. It's a low ABV, so that probably helps, but get a little bit of port, a little bit of that, I don't want to say caramel, but kind of a little bit, probably malty sweetness. A little bit of brighter fruits. I think that's the younger whiskey coming through. Or I should say it's young age. That's really nice. I tell you, for $22, that is and again, I don't have anything to back to back with cheaper whiskeys or the lower shelf whiskeys. But for the same price as those blended grain and malt whiskeys that you can get, this is an absolute no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. That's very, very pleasant. All right, let's go to the Quinta Ruban. All right, so now even more kind of richness, a little bit more depth is coming through. Age, I think, just brings a few more layers to the party, or can. Doesn't always, but it brings just a few more layers and some more nuance to it, right? So I get the port. I do get port right out of the gate, but that fades away I don't want to say fades away. It instantly kind of allows for a really nice single malt whiskey to come through. It's a little bit on the alcohol side as well. I'm getting a little bit of ethanol. It is 46%, and I do have a pretty fresh palate. So I'm a little extra sensitive to the alcohol right now, I can tell. I get a little bit of raisin, a little bit of that darker, kind of sweeter part of the grape. Obviously, it's coming from the port. It's just richer. Get a little bit of caramel even with this. A little bit of barley, sugar. It's also really, really, really nice. I gotta try this kind of back to back here. Yeah. So going back to the Glen Moray right away, it's like, tastes like moonshine almost. I know this isn't the proper way to taste whiskey, like sipping right back to back, but I do it almost because I want to see, like, this is working on a particular set of taste buds, I feel like. And like there's certain taste buds that are now alive and perked up now that I had this in my mouth. So with those still alive, let's see what happens when I taste this. And it really does give quite a contrast, or it sometimes brings out some bad notes or some good notes. So both recommended. If you like port cask finished whiskeys, this is really, really good. This has been kind of, I guess, I don't have a whole lot of port cask whiskey. I shouldn't say that, actually. I have probably 4 or 5, which I should probably review as well. Port cask finished whiskeys. This has generally been my go-to. It's a really great deal. For $62, for a 14-year-old single malt at 46%, I think that's a pretty fair rate, especially nowadays. It's something a little bit interesting. It does give you a little bit of that port cask. It's not overwhelming, so it's a little bit unique compared to your kind of run-of-the-mill, right, single malt Scotch. This, though, was a little bit surprising. Again, back-to-back. I hadn't back-to-back these before. This is really quite surprising. I'm going to dive back in. So, is it earth-shattering? No. It's not one-dimensional. It's maybe a little two-dimensional. It's like a pretty okay, good single malt Scotch with a little bit of port finish on it. It's really exactly what it says on the tin. At 40%, okay, that's not great. It's probably chill filtered and color added, whatever. Don't really care. It's $22. Like, I can't get over it. I got to give them their props for the fact that they can make a single malt whiskey, ship it all the way over here, and still only charge $21.99 for a bottle of single malt. So I think the moral of this story and this head-to-head is we've got 2 winners. It sounds so lame. I say 2 winners only that I think they fit slightly different camps, right? If you never tried a port finish whiskey before, this is a great place to start. If you don't want to spend $60, $70 a bottle on a scotch and you want to try just a bottle of scotch, this is a great place to start. I would say this line, I can't, like I said, I can't stack up or speak for the rest of the line, but I'm certainly going to try the rest of them, because I think that's a phenomenal deal nowadays, and all the prices are going up and up and up. These guys seem to be doing a great job of keeping it down. So this is a great buy, worth trying. What do you got to lose? Is $20. Is it going to blow your mind away? No, but it's certainly worth having on your shelf, and certainly introducing yourself to some different types of finished whiskeys. Like I said, they have a sherry finish, a peat finish, a regular one, a port cask, so they kind of covered all their bases as well. Now this guy, Glenmorangie, I'm a fan of Glenmorangie. I've like, it was one of Glenmorangie 10 was one of the first whiskeys I think I ever had, scotches, and it's kind of have a little place in my heart, the brand. And this again, a good deal, I think, for the price for a 14-year-old 46 ABV finished whiskey for 60 odd bucks. I think that's a fair price at least, and it's a good whiskey. It's a better whiskey than Glen Moray. Yeah, I would say there's a little more nuance, there's a little more going on. But it's also a third of the price. So again, they're both kind of winners, but in slightly different categories. It's kind of like a lightweight fighting a middleweight. It doesn't really work, right? So yeah, the moral of the story is I got to drink 2 more good whiskeys that I'm happy with, and I would recommend them both to you guys out there. Cheers. If you liked, give me a thumbs up. If you'd like to subscribe, that would be very cool too. I'd appreciate it. And we'll see what I pull out of my butt next time. Thanks for watching Happy Hour. Cheers.